The story begins with the fact that the black-haired guy feels cold. But it's still summer at the moment. He is in a certain space. Begins to feel the warmth behind him. He turns around and sees a girl with long blue hair approaching him. I've never seen her. I thought at first that she was a foreigner. But then he says that the girl does not look like a person. Then the guy is in the store and tells the customer that there are 4,000 won to be paid. He asks if he has a regular customer card, is interested in the receipt, thanks for the purchase and wishes the buyer all the best. A black-haired guy works in a store that is open 24 hours a day. Stipulates that customers in this convenience store are quite rare guests. He didn't have a chance to meet people after his break started. The black-haired guy feels like his tongue has turned to stone. Then, sitting down at the cash register, he opens the phone and notices that the chapter was updated in the middle of the night. The guy says that if they ask him why he works in this store, is he going to continue living like this? He really doesn't care as long as he gets paid well. The main question is how he will spend all his free time. The black-haired guy notices that a new character has been added to the chapter. Tired, he leaned on the table and says that a new character at this stage is quite a common and obvious thing. Looks at the picture that shows two girls. One of them with brown hair and holding a loaded bow. The second one stands behind her with red hair and is slightly lower than the first girl. After all, this is not the first and second books that the black-haired guy has read in his life. Usually he can predict how the story will develop from the very beginning. But that's why the guy likes countless challenges for heroes so much. Examining the following picture, which also depicts girls. One of them with red hair, covering them with a hood. The second with black lush loose hair. These girls seem to him to be cute heroines. Dragon hearts are powerful artifacts like magic swords. And at the end of the battle with the creator or the devil, the black-haired guy says. Examining at this moment a photo of a sword with a nearby heart, and another picture where the devil is depicted. This story is like an epic. That's why the black-haired guy loves fantasy. It is so familiar to him, and the guy can tell what will happen next. The black-haired guy's school life. After the release in the indefinite future after it becomes old. These familiar stories warm his soul. The black-haired guy's name is Oh Ju-yoon. Asking himself if there were any problems. And answers that they were not. Oh Ju-yoon is going through another day. On the way home, he constantly has the same thoughts in his head. If Oh Ju-yoon continues to live this life, what will happen to him next? When the black-haired guy was walking along the embankment on the way home, he noticed an inexplicable movement and fluctuation of the water with upward force in the river. Oh Ju-yoon at first thought that someone had fallen into the water and was trying to get out somehow. But he sees that there is a sign that says that bathing is prohibited. Continuing to observe what is happening, even though it is early in the morning, there is no one nearby who could help. If he runs to call for help, it may already be too late. Oh Ju-yoon decides to go into the water. What happened after all this, he does not remember at all. Again about Ju-yoon appearing at a deep depth in the river. There is a girl with blue hair next to him, and Oh Ju-yoon asks her if he is dead or not. And thus he is interested in her, that she is a type of reaper? The girl is in front of him with her eyes closed. The guy continues to watch her. He says he screwed up in full. Oh Ju-yoon didn't think he wouldn't be able to swim out when he went into the river. He thinks it's his mistake and asks about the person he was sleeping with. Oh Ju-yoon thinks he's fine. Oh Ju-yoon is trying to start a dialogue with the girl opposite him. But she watches him in silence. The guy thinks that he can read her mind, have telepathy. The girl then kisses Oh Ju-yoon on the forehead and tells him that he has another chance. The guy asks her again. A girl with blue hair tells him about a new life in a new world. Oh Ju-yoon watches as a kind of portal appears a couple of dozen meters away from him, which after a while absorbs Oh Ju-yoon. One distinct word came to his mind: reincarnation. What the characters experienced in the countless stories he read. Oh Ju-yoon in the rays of warming light. He begins to be overwhelmed with emotions of anticipation. The new life he got. It doesn't matter what he will be reborn into. Oh Ju-yoon's life there will probably be radically different from the previous one. The guy appears in the dungeon, where the tall tower is located in front. Oh Ju-yoon looks like a small animal with sharp teeth. It's his new body now. At least for the moment. He's not alone there. There are a lot of the same animals walking around the guy. But still nearby collects bricks in a box. Oh Ju-yoon wonders what's going on here, and what it all means. First he needs to find out where he is. asking the thug with the whip what kind of place it is. The guy in response receives only a menacing silence and a stern look at him. Oh Ju-yun thought that this bully does not know how to talk at all. Then he asks with horror what happened to his body. Something is wrong here about Ji-yun. The bully, unable to withstand all this, swings at him with a whip. And he tells Oh Ji-yun that he has to eat bricks and shit. Why is he shirking? Shouting menacingly at the guy, the bully thought that he wanted to die. And he continues to beat this little animal in which the soul of the guy is located. This was Oh Ju-yun's first spanking. He feels terrible pain from these blows. At this moment, the girl with blue hair prays that the guy will be given the strength to overcome all adversity and not lose himself. It is located in a certain temple which has the form of a dome with a red light inside. It's been a long time. Oh Ju-yun notices the status window as in the game. He has a soul rank of E. The Brick Eater race. He has no physical level. Combat power is 0 whole 1000th. 2 skills. 1 to devour dirt. The second is to wipe the bricks. Concentrating on Ji-yun can see these pop-ups. A small animal named Oh Ji-yun is standing and carefully studying his characteristic. But he wonders what he should do with it. Now he first of all needs to avoid spanking. So there is dirt and to wipe out bricks. Oh Ji-yun starts to taste the dirt. First you eat an appetizing-looking piece of dirt, and then you have to produce a brick. His bosses eat rocks instead of dirt. It's too difficult for him at the moment, so he'll focus on the dirt. After all, Oh Ji-yun only needs to avoid being spanked. And after eating one piece of dirt, Oh Ji-yun tries to produce what is needed. The result was the right one. 1 brick has already been made. The guy asks to refrain from further unnecessary clarifications. Think about how it will be fucked up. No, it makes the taste of dirt even worse. The bully stands next to the guy and watches him work. Oh Ji-yun eats a piece of dirt again with effort. But then he says that he will be flogged half to death. In a cave with minimal lighting. They eat shit, they get whipped. They produce bricks without a break. This seems to be the fate of the brick eaters. Oh Ji-yun looks around that there are thousands of people like him. The whole cave is littered with them. He thinks it's a living hell. Oh Ji-yun begins to think about what he did in his past life that they do this to him. He remembers selling expired lunch boxes in the store. Who would have thought that the guy would get into this rat after death? At this moment, a notification arrives that a new skill has been obtained. The guy asks himself that from what moment hell began to engage in beta testing of games these days. It's like the digital age, says the guy. The skill is a glorious soul. The one who has a glorious soul is not subject to physical limitations. Oh Ji-yun has no physical limitations. And the guy decides that there is something good in this glorious soul. Then Oh Ji-yun tells how everything was at first, that he, who died in an accident, was given a second chance at life. Thanks to this, the guy used reincarnation. At first, this life of his was very different from how he imagined it. Starting with the fact that he began to be flogged for nothing. And although for the fact that he did not produce bricks. So it took him a lot of effort to get used to it. But if it were possible for Oh Ji-yun to be able to experience everything that he has seen in many fantasy novels. Of course, the goal of all this cycle of events is to become the main character. A little animal named Oh Ji-yun continues to eat dirt and think about it all that happens. His body is exhausted, but he can't figure out why he can't sleep. All these effects are the reason why he can't fall asleep. That is, the glorious soul does not let him do it. Because he has no physical limitations now. Although it was a moment, Oh Ji-yun had a pleasant dream. All this talk about a glorious soul like this or like that. He had a feeling that all this was prepared for one purpose only. Oh Ji-yun should be mocked. Now the guy decides that he will not let anyone else make a fool of him. Oh Ji-yun gets 0 whole 1000th of the experience. If he produces bricks during the quest, then his experience seems to grow. If Oh Ji-yun continues to produce at this rate for 16,560 years, then he will be able to reach the next rank. This place is hell. A guy watches as a bruiser with blue skin beats up another worker, continuing to eat dirt at the same time. Then Oh Ji-yun finds out that he can see the statuses of others. After looking at the bully, the guy finds out that he is a zombie. His physical strength is 10. Combat power is also 10. Oh Ji-yun looks around and sees that everyone is gathering in one place. The guy notices that 2 zombies are arranging some kind of noisy gathering. In the hands of one zombie sits a small worker. Oh Ji-yoon thought that some big shot was coming to them. He sees creatures in red cloaks walking towards them, and carrying flags. And behind them, a tall demoness is moving. Of all the people Oh Ji-yoon managed to see after he arrived here, this demoness looks more like a normal person. She had a beautiful figure. Apparently this person occupies the highest position in the leadership. These zombie overseers don't dare to even move while standing in front of her in formation. Oh Ji-yoon decides to look at her status. It turns out that this is the production director. Soul rank V, Mazoku race. Mazoku is a kind of demon. The physical level is the 3rd. Combat power is 4010. Oh Ji-yoon wonders if her performance is too high. Then the guy watches the dialogue between the zombie and the demoness. She was saying something to him. The zombie apparently did not understand or did something wrong. Because Oh Ji-yoon, standing in the ranks, could not understand what they were talking about. But then the following happens. The zombie, after the words of the demoness, begins to run somewhere. She incinerated him with magic. Apparently she also knows how to wield magic. Seeing all this evidence that Oh Ji-yoon is in a fantasy world, he starts to get a little depressed. The guy is only gnawing at that thought. That there are definitely elves in this world. And that there is definitely a girl in their tribe. And the fact that, as now, he was not destined to be with her. And one more thing. Zombies begin to collect small workers in bags. For a brick eater like Oh Ji-yoon, his lifespan is negligible. But to be more specific about Ji-yoon, I would like to say that his endurance has one feature. The harder he works, the faster one thing catches up with him. By eating the stones on the walls of the cave and creating bricks, the dust that is contained there accumulates in his body. Begins to harden, eventually destroying his entire body. Wouldn't that be recognized as an industrial disaster? Asks about Ji-yoon. While Oh Ji-yoon was thinking and eating dirt, a zombie came up to him and hit the guy on the head, telling him that he should work faster. In this place, force and cruelty have replaced law and welfare. After they were shown magic as a bonus, the situation has worsened a little for them. Zombie supervisors fell into despair and began to put pressure on them, the workers, even more. To make them work even faster and more. Oh Ji-yoon is jealous of those brick eaters. To be like this from the very beginning and not know anything else, probably these guys feel happy. But not about Ji-yoon. He knows a lot more about life than they do. Much more than just a brick eater. Unlike the brick eaters and lousy zombies, Oh Ji-yoon was a completely different race from the very beginning. A kind of crystal appears above the guy. It starts to shine brightly, and it feels like a zombie is stuck on it. Then Oh Ji-yoon, in the body of a little grazi eater and a brick maker, became fiery. All the other workers were standing with their mouths open and didn't understand what was going on. The guy moved between dimensions. This strange confidence overwhelms Oh Ji-yoon. At that moment, chains began to appear around the crystal. Oh Ji-yoon had a feeling that he himself could do anything now. The activation of the hidden skill has begun. The prologue of the story about Ji-yoon has finally come to an end. Moving between dimensions, and even the reason why the guy was reborn in a new life, a goal that Ji-yoon had forgotten about. A power he had forgotten. At that moment, the zombie who was watching all this took and immediately after the story about Ji-yoon pinned him to the ground with his foot. After such an action, the guy does not want to say anything more. The zombie asked him what exactly he didn't want to say. After the guy practically didn't answer anything, the zombie continued to explain to the guy that he was shirking from work and that his was a harbinger of death for him. Zombie asked Oh Ji-yoon to learn some manners at least today. After he gets beaten up. And all the other workers who were standing and watching all this wished to continue to see how the guy would be beaten. After all, he does not work, but only carries some nonsense. At that moment, the guy understood all the rules of this world. Then there is a description of the greatness of Babylon. Before the overthrow of the Tower of Babel, the whole world spoke the same language. A special service for those who have crossed the dimensions. The agony and inability to communicate with others has been eliminated. Now Oh Ji-yoon understands the language of this world and can speak it. Oh Ji-yoon thinks it's obviously depressing. Then the guy was beaten. After a while, he was lying on the ground covered in bruises, after which a zombie approached him and ordered him to work again. And not to shirk. Now that he understands the language of this world, he hears how the stupid workers call him a lazy fool, the worst of all. Everything is fine for them as long as they are safe and sound. Rather, they are having fun looking at how Oh Ji-yoon is being hurt. And now the guy understood this, thinking of slaves who were brought together. Oh Ji-yoon is standing with his head down as he hears a zombie scream behind him. He asked him if he wanted to get it again. Or it will start working after all. The guy gets very tired. Time is running out, and he's just wasting his life in nowhere. He's just a one-time industrial tool loser. That's what he calls himself. The guy lay down to rest and notices how his foot begins to turn to stone from the dust that he absorbs. Not being able to see the sunrise or sunset. The guy can't say exactly how much time has passed since he got into this dungeon. In the current situation, Oh Ji-yoon can only assume that months have passed. Thanks to all that work, which they were forced to do by these responsible and hardworking zombies. The guy's body is rapidly collapsing. In just a couple of hours, his life will come to an end, and Oh Ji-yoon's short fantasy life will also end. This unbalanced life, this worthless character, this unsuccessful operation, and the guy knows that this game is lost. Oh Ji-yoon watches the Stone Eater and asks him what he is doing. He told him that he was working and that a lazy person was talking to him. That is, about Ji-yoon. And if that worker talks to him the same way, he will receive from zombies. If they beat him, he will die. Oh Ji-yoon thought that understanding the Yahweh of this world is very useful. Although it will become useless. And yet the guy wants to think that everything that the person who sent him here has done for him. He thinks she's good, and that she's some kind of angel. She's kind of a government employee. Oh Ji-yoon will have to see her again soon. So as soon as he gets there, the guy has to ask her. Is she really an official of the 9th rank? And at that moment, Oh Ji-yoon's body turned to stone and he was thrown from behind by a zombie into the abyss. He says it would be better if these workers rolled there themselves instead of having to throw them there. As soon as Oh Ji-yoon's body fell to the bottom, it broke apart. A zombie girl with a dog left there. And she saw a crystal in the guy's body. The zombie girl was asked what she was digging in the excrement there, and what she wanted to find there. I wonder why you're so weak, another zombie asked her. And her knowledge is superficial. With such zeal to rummage in such a place, another zombie said to her in surprise. Trying to find something valuable in that pile of garbage and something worthwhile scares another zombie. He says that the girl does not listen to him and behaves selfishly. As well as the fact that they will really find great joy in this pile of feces. The thoughts of the dead like them will only be further clouded. And then the girl tells him that when a dead man thinks about outstanding thoughts, what will become the legs on which lower people stand? There was also a zombie dog with them. So that the dead man could choose his own path and not follow others. He must first become worthy of this path. In order for the dead to resolve their differences, they must take the path of violence. This is the teaching that the sage bequeathed to them. 2 zombies go to a kind of crypt and the girl holds the crystal in her hands. Therefore, zombies should make every effort to create such a situation in which they would not have to work. At this moment, Oh Ji-yoon is in a place he doesn't understand, and some guy with horns and a long beard is standing over him. The guy thought that he had already died and that it was all over. But apparently not. It turns out that this is a zombie man, and he said that they can bring zombies at least sometimes, but be useful. They brought him something valuable, and at that moment the zombie continued to look at the guy further. Here a zombie dog runs up to the guy and starts licking him. Which made Oh Ji-yoon uneasy. Zombie professor turns on the lighting and now it's better to consider the guy. The professor chases the dog away and continues to study about Ji-yoon. The guy thought at the moment when the dog tried not to lick him or eat him. But the result is that the guy clearly saw the internal organs of this dog. The guy didn't think about what kind of trouble he got into. The ability to experience happiness or unhappiness in itself confirms that he is alive. And the professor tells the guy that he is about to be reborn. Oh Ji-yoon will see a whole new world. Unimaginable to a simple brick eater. And the guy is told to prepare to serve his master. To his creator. And Oh Ji-yoon does not want to be reborn at all, much less serve him. He had a hard time as it was. Here the thoughts of Ji-yoon are interrupted again, and the same girl with long and lush hair appears in front of him. A few months later they finally met. And Ji-yoon wants to learn a lot from her. And it seems to the guy that she does not hear him, even if she is facing him. And Oh Ji-yoon says it's heartless of her to ignore him like that. He asks her if there is a place in her heart to regret what a hellish place he has been. And what he had to go through. Oh Ji-yoon observes such a picture as 2 girls dancing together, and he is not noticed or heard. The rest of the elves are watching them. The memory of Ji Yun's head is gradually coming back to him. Not that he actually has a head, but that's how it feels. And now one of the girls turns to the other observers and addresses them as sisters and citizens. She is sorry that those people are suffering. The suffering is coming out. Willingness to do anything for the sake of the kingdom and for the sake of the brotherhood. The guy finally realized that all these scenes are from the past. These events have already come and they cannot be changed. At this moment there is a battle between the elves and a kind of demon squads. The owner of that voice in O.G. Yoon's head understands it too. But even without looking at it, that man was crying out to his sister to run away. These screams of unbearable suffering that were never destined to reach her. The guy wakes up and realizes that it was a dream. He also notices that he is chained to the wall. The guy examines his hand and is surprised. Now he looks more like a man, rather than when he was an incomprehensible being. O.G. Yoon decides to hold off on taking any steps for now. The artificial zombie is now a guy. His soul rank and physical abilities have increased slightly. Physical damage is 9. Combat power 25. Still, it's not for nothing that O.G. Yoon was reborn and got rid of the garbage character. Lustful comes up to him and says the crab hand is his creation, and asks to speak out on this matter. And here O.G. Yoon begins to thank the professor. He liked this hand, looks very cool. But the guy has a pain in the waist area and it's also a little empty there. It would be nice if you were a professor. Without letting the guy finish, Lustful pushes him against the wall and says that it's great that there was a mind inside the soul. And then he was already desperate that he wasn't there. The professor says about Ji Yun that it is better for him to try hard and recoup all the efforts that were spent on creating his body. At this moment, the professor performs some kind of spell by putting his palm to the guy's forehead. The soul shackle spell. It will consume O.G. Yun's mind. But Lustful tells the guy not to despair. The main feature of a servant is obedience. For his acolyte, the ability to think independently is a source of trouble. The spell cast on O.G. Yun will help him to know the pleasure of submission. The professor asks him to get up from the guy's knees and serve him. O.G. Yun thinks about the fact that he casts this spell and it reduces the intelligence of O.G. Yun. To make it easier to manage it, the professor asks the guy to check his hand, to see what she is capable of. His other servants will conduct a test for O.G. Yun. O.G. Yun at this moment begins to inspect the statuses of his servants. One of them is a zombie bat orc. Physical level 8. Combat power 20. The guy starts to think that Lustful will force him to fight with them. The second servant is a skinny zombie. This is stronger than the first, physical level 10th. Combat power 45. The skills he has are a face of dishonor and unshakable pride. And the last servant is a girl who found the crystal. Her indicators are lower than the others. O.G. Yun thinks it will be easier with her. Her physical level is the 10th. Combat power 16. The dried up servant skill. And a zombie dog. She has no rank. Physical level 10. Combat power 16. Of the skills he has, this is an amazingly great beast. And what to do about Ji Yun? Here comes the first servant against him. O.G. Yun had never been involved in fistfights before. Zombie bat orc starts attacking O.G. Yun. He just swallows his saliva in fear. But then, as if the hand itself began to function and began to strike the enemy with its claws, the guy breaks through the skull of the zombie and everyone watching in a stupor. They can't understand how this could have happened at all. Then O.G. Yun cuts the zombie with his hand and throws it in different directions. The first opponent is defeated. O.G. Yun had the feeling that he completely lost control of himself, and someone else started fighting for him. If you ask the question about Ji Yun if he fights well, he will answer that it is bad. Even when a guy was provoked, he tries to quietly avoid a fight. And he didn't even think of hitting anyone. However, to beat someone to such a state, only then that O.G. Yun was given such an order. It is unlikely that he could have done this himself. This is probably the effect of the shackles of souls. It looks like the weakest body on the deep knowledge of Kung Fu, said the second zombie. Before they started fighting, a dialogue ensued between them about the fact that the two of them serve the same master. The second zombie asks if O.G. Yun has the convictions to exchange blows. It would be wise to take advantage of this opportunity and see which of them is better to plan the days of the future. It is usually customary to treat elders with respect, says the skinny zombie. Continuing, he mentions that despite the strange situation, instead of following the path of the saint, he will follow the path of Nirim. And at this moment, Oh Ji-yoon doesn't understand anything at all what that zombie with the big hand is saying. The guy can't figure out what it all means. How confusing this world is. Isn't this a fantasy world? Demons are magic or something like that. Talking about Ji-yoon. What's wrong with the way this zombie speaks? Is this a historical drama? Or it's from martial arts literature? A zombie with a big hand takes a fighting stance and allows Oh Ji-yoon to be the first to do whatever he wants. Once again, with these words, he puts the guy into a stupor and bewilderment. In appearance, for Oh Ji-yoon, this guy clearly looks very like a strong one. Luzful intervenes in the conversation and tells them to stop talking and start fighting. He does not like when they simply waste time. And after they finish, let them not forget to fix the floor that they broke. At this, the professor falls silent and continues to watch. The zombie with the big hand says that he will finish this fight in one move and then carry out the professor's instructions. Oh Ji-yoon takes a kind of fighting stance and waits. Here the zombie immediately starts telling him to approach him. Oh Ji-yoon agrees and accelerates at maximum speed in the direction of the zombies. Even if the opponent's level is much higher, his body is old and decrepit, so Oh Ji-yoon has a chance to win. The guy strikes with the crab hand, but the zombie skillfully repels this attack. An attempt to overcome force with the help of force makes a person ignorant. A smart person will suppress it with the help of his skills. The zombie holds the capture of this crab hand and tries to strike at it. He uses the deadly fourfold fortified strike technique. But everything happens differently. Takes the damage itself from its own attack. The guy doesn't understand what happened. A zombie lying in pieces on the ground says that with such a body it was impossible. Oh Ji-yoon asks him again. But the zombie responds to him by saying that the guy apparently decided to laugh with him. For the first time I saw someone commit suicide because of an unsuccessful attempt to use their own technique. The zombie didn't stop training in this ridiculous world. In a world where he has to change his body every time. A zombie cannot cope with the techniques of the second year of the 60-year cycle being in the body of this rotting corpse. The zombie girl walks up to the zombie, lifts his head and covers his mouth with her palms. Oh Ji-yoon won. He thinks it's all over. The professor says that the result is on the face. The result is quite obvious. Luzful asks the guy how his condition is and how his arm is. Whether he likes his new body. To which the guy replies that he likes everything and his condition is quite normal. The professor thinks that the side effects from the shackles of the soul affect the speech of Ji-yoon. But Luzful continues with the fact that there is nothing you can do about it. The professor decides to use Oh Ji-yoon for another experiment if he doesn't break down. The professor will show him the limits of Oh Ji-yoon's pain. If he can stand it if he breaks down too carelessly. And in the end congratulates the guy that he was lucky. He was born in his laboratory. And calls it by another name Arc Palace. Arc Palace will have to work tirelessly as an assistant professor. If Oh Ji-yoon wants to cover the costs of the experiment with which he was created. And Oh Ji-yoon thinks that it's still better to work off the debt in this body than in the body of a brick eater. He was promoted to assistant scientist. Oh Ji-yoon is testing the abilities of his new hand. He easily destroys stones that fall into the claw. Oh Ji-yoon can't control this arm because it's too strong. The guy needs to fix the floor as soon as possible, but he doesn't know how to do it with one left hand. He would appreciate it if he could make the claw cause less trouble in everyday life. But here another zombie approaches him and says that the boy is growing up quickly and martial arts are very difficult. Therefore, it is impossible for him to shirk his daily duties. Why doesn't Oh Ji-yoon stop pointlessly breaking stones on the floor and get to work already? But the guy asks him why he doesn't feel guilty that the floor is broken. He may have lost, but that doesn't exempt him from it. To which the zombie replied that he was only doing the professor's errands. Since Oh Ji-yoon also serves him, the guy must show his loyalty to him. Luzful is the owner of this place and also the one who created the guy's body. A strange man, of course. But he seems to be from the demon race, but he gives the impression of a very skilled specialist. At least by the standards of Oh Ji-yoon's world, it would be impossible to piece together and revive the dead. Only in the distant future. The guy thinks that in the fantasy world, even anyone can be a necromancer of the first level. Turning at this moment to the dog that he called Sunday. He constantly walks around with his guts falling out. Sunday is a dish of Korean cuisine, which is a kind of black pudding that looks like black intestines. But if you hide the parts from which the organs fall out, then the dog becomes cute. That's what Oh Ji-yoon says while stroking her head. He's a little silly, of course, but that's probably why they're so cute. In the laboratory, this dog follows the girl more. She doesn't have a name, she can't speak and is very weak. In the campaign, she is at the bottom of the food chain. Probably because of this, she does all the housework in this place. After a while, Oh Ji-yoon noticed that apart from the girl, all the others are not of much use to the Lizafel. A zombie bat whose supposed intelligence is below 70 knows nothing. Other than being strong and losing to a guy. The girl cleans up in the laboratory, collects resources for experiments by a research assistant. Sunday feeds, buys chemicals, errand girl, and so on. The dog is just cute. And a zombie with a big hand carries all sorts of shit in the literal sense. Against the background of their effectiveness, the soul shackle spell looks very impressive for the owner of Oh Ji-yoon. Oh Ji-yoon asks the girl if it's so dangerous on the street that you need to go for small purchases with security, to which she answers him with a kind of published words. He does not understand anything at all from the word. After a couple of months of Oh Ji-yoon becoming a crab hand, he was ordered to go outside the laboratory. The girl waves her hands in different directions trying to explain something. But the guy does not understand why she starts to get angry. He wonders why Luzafel and all his subordinates are not friends with their heads, including himself. And here they are together, the girl and Oh Ji-yoon are heading towards the city. Baltiki District. The underground city of darkness looks oddly simple. At the beginning of the famine, there are statues of demons in front of the gate. This is one of the magical or dark worlds, which can often be found in books in the fantasy genre. The surrounding creatures look dangerous according to Oh Ji-yoon, but they continue to follow what they were ordered to buy. The life-hating undead probably increased in numbers every time they invaded the surface. Bandits are probably a dream team assembled from inveterate villains filled with greed and thirst for murder. And yet Oh Ji-yoon is glad that among these demons, undead and other brats he has this crab hand. A guy passing by notices a dark elf sitting on a box and drinking. His aura, posture, and how he drinks, all this suggests that he is facing absolute evil. In all likelihood, it was taken away from the white elves living on the surface as a trophy. Terrifying dark elves enjoying the last screams of their victims with every sip of this wine. But then an elf girl comes up to that elf and pulling that ear tells him to go to work. And then he sits drinking wine and imagines himself unemployed. But that guy told her that he was going to go soon, he was just going to do it. He just wanted to drink some wine. But the girl responds to him by saying that he already has this drinking of wine lasts half a day. They are inundated with orders and everyone is waiting. This dark elf clearly has the audacity to drink half a day. Oh Ji-yoon, watching all this, still changed his mind. It turns out that these are not the dark elves he thought of. That man was lucky to marry such a beautiful, dark elf. Walking further through the city, Oh Ji-yoon and a zombie girl notice two sellers. One elf, and apparently the second girl is a vampire. The vampire girl loudly says that the raw materials store from the undead next life has opened its doors to customers. On the occasion of this event, everyone can get free antiseptics if they buy something during their event. The elf guy at this moment offers everyone to try snacks with mushrooms. Oh Ji-yoon thinks it's like a perfectly ordinary human village, because of his experience of the sad experience of being in the skin of a brick eater. Oh Ji-yoon apparently has some stereotypes about this world. Next, a guy with a crab claw and a zombie girl go into a kind of mine, where Oh Ji-yoon notices minerals on the ceiling. He says that these minerals are like glowing lamps. The zombie girl asks him again, but he doesn't understand anything. Then continue walking along the mine, where the skulls of demons or undead were hung on the walls. But here the guy assumes that the zombie girl asks him what a lamp is. At this moment, he is convinced that she is more inquisitive than she seems, and thinks how to explain it to her. Thinking about this question, the guy observes that there are bats on the ceiling of this shaft, and continues to walk further. Before explaining everything to her, Oh Ji-yoon asks the girl if she knows exactly the way they are going. Approaching the door together, a voice is heard. Skulls on the walls begin to greet travelers. Oh Ji-yoon on a subconscious level doesn't want to go there through that door. The zombie girl comes in first with a bang. There are books in the room, there is a candle and a scroll on the table. Along with this, some kind of potion was spilled. A kind of frog corpses are suspended from the ceiling. But at this moment, a creature similar to a reptile jumps out of nowhere and immediately stipulates that he has antiseptics. They are very popular among the undead. Offers a moisturizing cream that prevents drying and peeling of the skin. Recently, this cream has become a trend among the undead for skincare. Oh Ji-yun stands in fright and does not think anything. Then the reptile continues that in his pharmacy they can find any medicine they want. If there is no cure, then the reptile will certainly get it. The zombie girl standing behind the reptile utters a kind of sounds like you BBB and so on. The reptile turns in her direction. After asking her what she said, he clarifies from her exactly the Luziful dolls. The girl agrees with him. The reptile stipulates that the Luziful is a strange type, and at the same time begins to mix potions. In Luziful's place, the reptile wouldn't buy slaves instead of spending money to create dolls. He gives the potion to the zombie girl, continuing to say that slaves can reproduce when they are taken care of. Reptile finds this method very interesting. If you add up all the medicine expenses he has spent to date, then he would be able to buy several pairs of slaves capable of reproduction. And yet someone occupies a high position, completely crazy. And Oh Ji-yoon remarks that he is already used to such inhumane treatment. He finds it sad. The reptile allocates a claw, which instead of a hand the guy has. He says that such barbaric things apparently like Luziful very much. Most likely, Luziful was beaten as a child or something like that. Oh Ji-yoon tells the girl that they listened for an hour to the reptile talking all sorts of nonsense about their owner. He acted as if they didn't exist. Oh Ji-yoon was especially infuriated by the fact that his master was being vilified. The Luzaful is strange, of course, dude, but Oh Ji-yoon is not affected by the effect of the shackles of the soul. Walking up the stairs, the zombie girl does not feel particularly well. Her legs begin to give way, she continues to hold on to the bag of potions. Oh Ji-yoon comes back to her and tells her what he will do when she has completely used up her power. So Oh Ji-yoon takes the potion bag for himself. The guy with the crab claw doesn't know the way back. And if the zombie girl passes out, then he does not know what he will do next. This is the first time Oh Ji-yoon has gone outside the lab. The zombie girl is trying to tell him something. But Oh Ji-yoon doesn't understand. It seemed to the guy with the crab claw that he was worried for no reason, but it was dangerous here. Although there is no racial segregation in this world, there is apparently a slave trade. Oh Ji-yoon doesn't know where they get these slaves from and continues walking back with the zombie girl through the tunnel. He needs to be on the alert wandering through these streets. Then the story shows that two people are walking among the crowd. An elf and a girl with him. Her tail resembles something like a tail like a demoness. She walks beside him and hums something. Then he stands on his toes and watches something intently. He sees how reptiles in armor are walking. Those are accompanied by elves with trumpets on their chests, the sound of which carries far. And they are followed by a girl in a black dress on a horse. A girl with a demoness tail is trying to walk through the crowd and take a closer look at this person on a horse. But she is dragged back from the crowd and they speak faster. The girl in the black dress is a countess. She had been watching the girl with the demoness ponytail all this time as soon as she left the crowd. A guard approaches the countess and asks her what could have happened. But she replies that apparently a child was abducted in front of her. The guard asks permission to send soldiers for the girl. But the countess did not consider it necessary. She said it was useless to save weak and stupid creatures. This is the whole essence of this world. It makes no sense to undermine the market because of all sorts of trifles. The girl is in some kind of tunnel, where she is sitting and crying, asking for forgiveness from her grandfather. He says he won't do it anymore. But the girl in the cloak with horns answers her that he told her to be careful, even if no one is chasing them, it is dangerous to continue to be in this place. This place is very dangerous, and if the girl shows even momentary weakness, consider that your soul stone will come to an end. Against the background of their conversation, the corpses of elves lay near them. Apparently it was those who chased them, but as a result they received nothing but death. The girl will suffer the same fate as those bandits lying nearby. From this moment on, the girl will behave cautiously. Then the grandfather in the raincoat takes the child by the hand and they go in an unknown direction. Brick eaters, zombies, beasts, dark elves and lizardmen. And now vampires. Says all this about Ji-yun. Countess Vampire, investigating her status, Oh Ji-yoon learns that the rank of the soul in the physical level is the fourth. The fighting power is deadly. Of the skills, this is the Steel Lady of Shadows. And Oh Ji-yoon thinks how interesting her fighting power is shown in the form of a skull with a red rim. Yes, the undead even have their own shops, it turns out. Maybe this red skull means that if Oh Ji-yoon tries to fight her, then his skull will probably be crushed. Such thoughts visit the head of a guy with a crab claw. It seems Oh Ji-yoon has seen all races except humans. After Oh Ji-yoon learned the roots of movement, while doing small errands, buying experimental ingredients for Lucifer. Now this is the main work of Oh Ji-yoon. He was already used to life here, so he was able to live for several months without any special incidents. This became possible only because Oh Ji-yoon combined the common sense of this world. He comes to that shop again. The skulls on the wall greet the buyer again. For example, an ordinary person would be uncomfortable with the idea that there are no police here. If you meet a criminal, they prayed that he would be weaker than you. So it happened once. When Oh Ji-yoon was returning with potions for Lustful and met two overgrown rats who killed one elf and searched him. Every time Oh Ji-yoon meets someone who looks dangerous, the guy shows a claw. For this, he is grateful to his master that he gave it to him. At one point, when Oh Ji-yoon was walking back, he noticed a silhouette in a raincoat. He was constantly watching the guy with the claw. And Oh Ji-yoon didn't understand who it was at all. Oh Ji-yoon considers himself an impeccable servant. When the moment of tracking the guy with the claw happened again, Oh Ji-yoon turns around and looks into the hood of the cloak. A minute's silence and looking at each other. Then the cloaked entity quickly disappears into the alley. The guy with the claw doesn't understand what's going on. Considers him obviously suspicious. The constant surveillance of Oh Ji-yoon is apparently not just like that. Some shorty, do not forget that this is a fantasy world. He may belong to some incredibly magical race. Or that one may have associates. Of course, they don't know what Oh Ji-yoon has with him for medicines. But they look quite expensive. Therefore, looking at this from their point of view, Oh Ji-yoon looks like an ATM with a claw. He has to protect these drugs. This is the charm of his master. Oh Ji-yoon starts running away from that little man in the raincoat with all her might. In fact, he could easily chop up a couple of random thieves. But it will be difficult to do this while maintaining the integrity of the vials. At the moment of returning to the laboratory about Ji-yoonu, the professor says that he was dismissive of the ingredients, which Lucifer ordered to be delivered in one piece. Then he decides to conduct an experiment. Oh Ji-yoon begs for mercy from Lucifer. But he replies that everything will be fine. He won't touch the life of the guy with the claw. And blunt about Ji-yoon in the form of a dog. The claw replaces his tail. The second zombie is exactly the same. Only he got worse. His head was attached to the dog's backside. And here's a zombie with his head on the dog's ass, saying it's time for a walk. And that this dog's life is not so bad. Zombie girl walks too. But Oh Ji-yoon says that life is no different from the original one when he was a brick eater. No, it's different. The problem is about Ji-yoon's sense of self-worth. A dignity that everyone else so diligently ignores. At the very least, Oh Ji-yoon should respect and appreciate himself. When Oh Ji-yoon was running away from the dwarf, he immediately turned into an alley. When the tracker was running after the guy with the claw, he didn't see where the guy with the medicine was. Looking at all this from the side, Oh Ji-yoon quietly giggles from the dwarf. Oh Ji-yoon wondered who could have coveted Mr. Lucifer's vials, which is accompanied by his faithful servant Crab Hand, and decides to look at the face of this audacious creature. But at this moment, a zombie with a head on a dog says that friendship with the benevolent makes kind, with the evil on the contrary. This is the essence of friendship. With whom you will be led, you will get enough. Then this dwarf in a raincoat runs further down the alley in an opportunity to catch up with Oh Ji-yoon with the medicine. But then he crashes into two creatures that are 3 times his size. Their faces were like the face of a bat. Oh Ji-yoon is watching all these from the side. And he says that here they are. As expected, they look intimidating. And Oh Ji-yoon thinks about what to do, fight or something. Considering that the guy with the crab hand needs to keep the vials intact. These two creatures with the face of a bat raise the same dwarf and ask him who he is. Thief or not. They also asked him if he wanted to die or not. Once I dared to crash into them. One of the monsters lifts the dwarf higher and decides to check his pockets. That way they'll know if he's a thief or not. But the dwarf shouts at the top of his voice that he is not a thief. And it turns out that this dwarf is a little girl. She says what they will do if it turns out that Jia is not really a thief. How will they live with it after this? And OGU notices that it's a child's voice. He watches everything happening in amazement. Two monsters do not know what they will do if it turns out that the girl is not a thief. But then they tell her that they came for lunch. And with eyes full of hunger, they examine the girl. The tender meat of a young devil sounds appetizing to them. Her owner is not around. Otto will be the first to grab Jia and be able to eat him. The girl at this moment begins to cry loudly and scream at the top of her voice. If two monsters get it before the owner shows up, then there won't be any problems. And one of the monsters tells the other to drain the blood carefully. Because he doesn't like it when meat stinks. The monster opens its huge mouth and shows the girl its teeth. But at this moment, he breaks into the conversation about Ji-yun. She tells them to get their dirty hands off her. Don't they know that eating all sorts of stuff will make their stomachs ache? He calls them retarded morons. Monsters with bad faces stand in disbelief, and the girl looks at him with tears in her eyes. This bat orc that holds the girl has a soul rank of D. The physical level is 7th. Combat power 104. Of the skills there is a meat taster. The second one standing behind that one is soul rank D. Physical level 7. Combat power of 120. The skill is a scrupulous predator. And OG Yoon understands that he's completely fucked up. And the two orcs immediately began to go to OG Yoon together. The guy with the crab arm stops them and tells them what they are. Don't get him wrong, but OG Yoon just wanted those two orcs to listen to him. But one of them looms over OG Yoon and starts growling. OG Yoon didn't want to call them underdeveloped morons, he swears. But the orc says he heard the way he said it. To this, OG Yoon replies that the orc just seemed to have an imagination, it was an illusion. The guy with the crab hand feels the smell, as the smell of zombies. But surely he has bad breath. Once next to them, OG Yoon was finally convinced. He shouldn't have fought, remember when you came into this world. A guy with a crab hand shouldn't ruin his life by saving others he doesn't know at all. The orc turns around and walks away from OG Yoon. You need to take care of yourself at all costs. One orc bat asks another how to cook this girl. Today he wants to taste raw meat. Such expensive meat has not fallen into their hands for a long time. It will be bad if they overcook or overcook this meat. It's not worth wasting such good. OG Yoon is standing with his back to them at the side at this moment. The orcs decide to preserve the meat for a few days before they can eat it raw. But the other one really wants to eat, and he asks the one what you order him to do. A girl among the orcs looks at a guy with a crab hand. OG Yoon decides that there is no other choice. To do justice to opponents who are clearly stronger than him. This is generally a job for the main characters' heroes. The injustice is that these heroes can lose and fail. But they will still look cool, unlike him. OG Yoon is different from them. Before or after he came to this world, OG Yoon was never a hero. At this moment, one orc takes the girl's head in his palm, her eyes fill with even more tears and her breath freezes in anticipation of death. Therefore, all fantasies of heroic deeds were completely discarded by OG Yoon. He grits his teeth and turns to the orcs. Drops the medicine bag on the ground, the noise of which caused two orcs to turn to OG Yoon. They were wondering what this time. OG Yoon decides to offer them a deal. A very good offer. Wouldn't these two orcs like to exchange the girl for these vials? They will definitely like this condition. Ji-yun definitely heard about it from the owner of that shop. These vials cost at least a couple of slaves. Actually, the guy with the crab arm was already doomed when he got into this world. And since he's doomed, there won't be anything wrong with acting a little cool. Two orcs in their hands with a girl approach the vials with interest and inspect them. Pretty good deal for orcs. The orc shakes hands with OG Yoon as what they agreed. The guy with the crab arm feels this power that was in the status of an orc. And he says that he can already let go of his hand. OG Yoon will give the vials if the orc lets go of his hand. But he breaks his arm. Orc says he doesn't care who Ojiyun calls him, he doesn't care. But trying to breed an orc is a completely different matter. The orc tries to eat Ojiyun at this moment, but an explosion occurs. A smoke screen appears between them. Ojiyun doesn't understand what kind of explosion it was just now. But the guy, seeing that an orc is coming to him, starts telling him that if he doesn't like something, then let him say it. The guy with the crab arm is against violence. The orc swings both hands at Ojiyun. He misses and starts growling loudly at the guy with black hair, creating a strong sound wave. Ojiyun falls backwards from this. The receptors on the bodies of zombies are dying, so even if they break a bone or strike, the guy with the crab arm will not even feel pain. However, this does not mean that he can move further after the impact. One of the orcs comes up to the guy with black hair and says that he can tell with his rotten brains how this world works. This world is inherently saturated with cruelty and violence. The orc gets his big foot Ojiyun right on the hand and starts to put pressure on it. Thus, he can show weakness and incite others against himself. The girl at this moment begins to cry loudly. But of course it won't happen, because he will settle all accounts with him. Ojiyun is shouted so that the orc does not touch the child. He doesn't know why the orc is so angry, but the guy with the crab hand apologizes to him. The orc responds to the guy to lie still and enjoy the performance. His knuckles will hurt if he hits Ojiyun. Instead, it will be much more effective if the orc tears the girl to pieces. And of course he will eat right in front of his eyes. What about Jiyun will say to this? They look with a smile on their face at Ojiyun's trembling lips. Why is the guy with the crab arm constantly failing? Two orcs are already preparing to cut the girl. One orc still holds hands and feet, the second approaches with a knife. Ojiyun's consciousness is leaving him. A hidden skill is activated. Type physical rank B, cannibal in regeneration. The arm broken by the orc at Ojiyun begins to recover. The eyes turn red. Description of the skill that even if you don't have internal organs or intestines, your thirst for blood and flesh will always remain with you. Ojiyun stands in front of the orcs with his head down. One orc asks what's wrong with the guy with the crab arm. There is a temporary strengthening of Ojiyun, as a rule, under the action of a special spell. In this case, the physical possibility increases. With a sharp movement of his hand, Ojiyun cuts off the head of one of the orcs. Blood begins to flow like a fountain. A girl with blood on her face looks at Ojiyun with surprise. The guy with the crab arm tells the orc in a demon voice to let the girl go. His body has become so light. Ojiyun's new skill, for once, it turned out to be useful. Grabbing the orc by the head, Ojiyun with his hand where the claw pierces through his body. The girl looks at all this aside with horror. Ojiyun turns to the girl, asking if she is doing well. She could have just died. The guy examines his hands and sees that now he is just a spirit. Looking at his body with the hand of a crab, he sees how it approaches the girl and tells her that he wants meat. Pressing the girl against the wall, the soulless body keeps wanting to eat her. Ojiyun's soul tries to push the cannibal back away from the girl. This is his body, he must stop. Ojiyun can't touch him. It's over. An explosion occurs, the crab arm falls away from the cannibal. Grandfather comes out from the dark to the girl, says that the check is over. Ojiyun's existence is now indisputable. He had been looking for someone like Ojiyun for a long time. Welcomes a soul from another world. Next, Ojiyun appears and the lab pipes are attached to his body. The crab arm was sewn on again. His body has almost recovered. The soul also had to come back. The girl's grandfather says all this. Ojiyun looks at the status of this demon. Soul rank S. The demon race. Physical level 1. Combat power of 3 skulls. He has 3 skulls, apparently he is stronger than that vampire. They ask him that he can only see the status of any creature. Whoever it is. The girl shows her own. She has a soul rank of A. Physical level 2. Combat power 3. Jiang says he's betting that Ojiyun is amazed by her greatness. She will be stronger than a brick eater. Stroking the girl on the head. And he says that she is well done, and is glad that she is fine. Ojiyun turns to the demon and asks him that he knows where he came from. That's it, this time it's for real. Finally, Oh Ji-yoon was recognized as a hero from another world. But he replies to the guy with the crab hand that apparently he is not familiar with the manners of this world. A pathetic and irresistible soul, but in the name of Malgos, he warns him. So that Oh Ji-yoon wouldn't dare to talk to him like that. Until he gets permission from him, the great Tarna. Oh Ji-yoon understood everything and silently sits on. He is true to his democratic ideals even as a slave. But the great Tarna does not care about his world, the past world. He wants to give the guy with the black hair a chance. It will certainly be a blessed path. The great way that despicable souls like Oh Ji-yoon don't even dare to dream about. Oh Ji-yoon thinks that you need to keep yourself in hand. Besides the fact that he has incredible abilities. This fucking old man is somehow his savior. And tries to calm down. Oh Ji-yoon says he refuses. The girl standing next to the great Turnai wonders why the guy with the black hair decided so. More precisely, Oh Ji-yoon can't. His master is a loser. Maybe he's a weirdo, but at least he lets the guy live. The demon leans close to Oh Ji-yoon's face and stares into his eyes. It's not too late yet. If Oh Ji-yoon agrees and apologizes, then maybe he'll let him live. His demonic aura is just terrible. The demon praises Oh Ji-yoon. His devotion is comparable to that of the Minotaur. It seems that in the past, Oh Ji-yoon was born to serve or be a slave. The guy with the crab arm doesn't agree with these. He says it's possible because his soul is bound to him by a soul shackle spell or something. Oh Ji-yoon asks the demon that his master is like him, the great Tarnai. The girl sits down next to Oh Ji-yoon and touches his lower part, which is extra organs. Touching the spine, she asks the guy with the crab hand where the food will go after he eats it. Lizaful cast a spell as soon as Oh Ji-yoon came into this world. The girl at this moment disconnects the pipes from Oh Ji-yoon's body and asks him if it doesn't hurt him. After all, he's a zombie. But the guy with the crab arm answers her, if he were not a zombie, he would be much more hurt by such needles that are connected by a pipe. The demon says about Ji-yoon that in this case he cannot take him. Taking the servants of another Tarna without their permission, being a Tarnai, means that the demon is plotting a vendetta against them. It won't be difficult to kill the Lizaful. But getting involved in such noisy affairs is quite tedious. Oh Ji-yoon says that apparently the great Mr. Malgos has some kind of backstory that he doesn't know about. But Oh Ji-yoon is glad to hear that if the one to whom he will owe so much dies, it will be very problematic. The demon smiles. And tells Oh Ji-yoon to go back to his master. But if he talks about what happened today, the demon will finish off Oh Ji-yoon and Lizaful and his comrades. If you look at Malgos' strength, you can immediately say that he is not bluffing. Oh Ji-yoon understands everything. But Malgos didn't tell him something. Malgos is looking for someone like Oh Ji-yoon, not from this world. Then for what purpose? Oh Ji-yoon thinks this is an important point. Is this something that only a hero from another world can cope with? But the demon responds by saying that Ji-yoon is not supposed to know this. Isn't it better to think about what will happen to Oh Ji-yoon next? After he broke the vials of medicine? Says the demon. Could it be that Oh Ji-yoon just imagined everyone just to forget about what would happen to him next? It doesn't matter, he's already doomed anyway. Calm and very patient. He can endure humiliation, but at the same time he is brave. Ignorant, but kind and knows about honor. All this is said by the demon to his granddaughter. If he was given a choice between a rich and happy life by this soul, Oh Ji-yoon would undoubtedly choose the latter. Oh Ji-yoon will definitely find them again. And he calls his granddaughter my mistress. Between the piles of rubbish of the lustful laboratory. Or a shelter. Palace. Oh Ji-yoon is in the lab and is watching Lizaful do his experiments again. Everyone is watching. Lizaful calls Oh Ji-yoon great. Appeals to the whole world and asks if they are looking at it. Soon their glorious days will be very close. With this, Lizaful will end his long project. Soon everyone will know his name. The name is Lizaful. And continues to laugh out loud. The demon who offered him to become his subordinate meets with Oh Ji-yoon again and says they won't find out about it. Fantasy. This is the first thought that appeared in Oh Ji-yoon after Malgos told him the following. All the corpses in this world are sold at auction. The prices of these orc bats are not comparable to Bubbles. Apparently, the inhabitants of this world can install soul stones in corpses. And this allows them to live in other bodies. It's actually more like SF. Oh Ji-yoon looks at his status. It doesn't matter anyway. With the help of soul stones, people in this world can get a strong body and a completely different life. They can even inherit the skills and knowledge of the previous owner. It may be a fantasy, but there is some kind of science behind it. In the end, all the memories and skills remain in the brain. The bodies that are with the highest need, but at the same time the one that is the hardest to get is the demon child's body. Being in the body of a demon means living as an aristocrat of this world. The main jackpot of lotteries in this world. And that's why the demon children are either kept inside all the time, or sent with numerous bodyguards. Why adult demons, whose magical power, straightforwardness, and knowledge have reached the top, do not bargain. Oh Ji-yoon won't go into details right now. Apparently, there are very few such bodies. Oh Ji-yoon thinks that demons change their appearance when they turn about 16. Oh Ji-yoon looks at his status again. Soul rank E. A synthetic zombie race. Physical level 9. Combat power 25. The skill is a painless dirty prisoner. At that moment, someone appears behind him with a large syringe and hits him right in the back, causing Oh Ji-yoon to lose consciousness. The guy with the crab hand is worried that his memories will disappear again. Instead of worrying now, he's more annoyed. Oh Ji-yoon is suspended by his hands hanging over a bubbling cauldron. He notices that a zombie girl and a Luzafo are standing at the bottom. Oh Ji-yoon asks the professor what's going on. But he answers him, this is what Oh Ji-yoon did. Luzafo immediately released him without any consequences. He considers himself an honest master. Not going to let go for those broken bubbles, thinks about Ji-yoon. The guy with the crab hand is trying to explain that a fight was coming. After that, it is lowered into the boiler and closed. Generators start working. Luzafo starts working hard on something. After the completion of Oh Ji-yoon comes out of a kind of cell and is immediately asked how he feels. To which Oh Ji-yoon replies that it has been updated. And examines his body. Noticing that the lower part where the belly is all filled. There is no emptiness there anymore, except for one vertebra. The right hand, which was a claw, is now normal.